May I request Chandrasekhar Saab, President NASSCOM, to give his inaugural address.
A very good morning to all of you. It's indeed a pleasure to be here and to inaugurate this conference on a particularly important topic for the country. And all of us know, we have been hearing in the sessions earlier about the kind of disruption that is happening, and this is a fact of life now the world over. It's a fact of life in every country, it's a fact of life in every sector. And what is interesting is that the pace at which it is happening is only accelerating. It's not slowing down, nor is it even being maintained at that frenetic pace which is already there. Way back in 2015, NASSCOM had brought out a report on Perspective 2025, where we talked about the changes which are taking place in the industry, in the technology industry, and how much would change, and that by 2025, as much as 60% of the industry revenues would come from digital. And the question therefore was, I think what the lady from SBI was talking about, that, what do you do if you can't beat the disruptors? Do you try to fight them or you join them? At that time, when that report came out saying that this is the pace of disruption, many people, even within the industry, I'm talking about people who are living in the technology world and who do technology as their bread and butter business, many of them believed that this was way too ambitious, that it was over-projected, and that things were not going to change that quickly. The reality is that just 2 years later, we find that the change has happened faster than was predicted, not just at that pace. So this is how wrong even people who are in the technology were in understanding the pace of this change. Now imagine for people outside technology who are in sectors which are getting impacted by technology, who may not even be able to anticipate the pace at which this change is happening. So therefore the question is, how do you really prepare for that change, and what can you do? I'll give you another instance. The financial sector in particular is one which is being disrupted at the most incredible pace. Again, if you look at it, it's particularly important for the IT sector in India for two reasons. Number one is that as much as 34% of the Indian IT BPM industry's $154 billion comes from the BFSI segment, banking, financial services and insurance. And as much as 41% of the exports come from that sector. But if you look at the domestic market, it's only around 15%. And therefore, we are within the country at a fairly early stage of adoption. And already if you hear everything that is being said, people are feeling, it's like when you're going in a train which is going very fast on the Indian tracks, you start feeling that it's getting a little unstable, starts rattling, starts swaying. You're feeling that at this pace, and we are still under-penetrated. And let me tell you that in 2015, the world saw more than 12,000 new startups and $19 billion being invested in fintech. That's the kind of power which is going into driving these technologies. So we are, in that sense, the financial sector is downstream of all this huge power that is going on. In India, we stand at a particularly interesting confluence. Again, many of these things have been said about the mobile penetration, about the smartphone penetration, about the internet penetration. 1 billion subscribers, more than 600 million unique users, nearly 400 million internet users, and a demographic which is skewed towards the lower end, more than 65% being below 35 years of age, and being more rapid adopters of technology. So the ecosystem outside is a little more ready to come in. And now you have disruptors who are coming in like Jio, who have promised greater reach and a lower cost. One thing with each of these disruptions is that the incumbents have been severely challenged. Challenged to a point where their whole business model can collapse. Now the question is, and both in terms of policy and in terms of regulation, how do you actually deal with that? The tendency always is for incumbents to, seek to protect their turf. It's only natural. I don't think there's anything unnatural about it. And if you look at examples in different sectors, when the telecom sector was challenged by OTT players, the effort was to either stop that from coming in or to actually say that they have to be subject to the same regulations, which doesn't make sense because those regulations really make no sense at all for somebody who's not owning a single piece of telecom infrastructure. Similarly, if you look at the mobile, in India, the mobile came in only in 1994 in a very small way with NTP 1994. But it was delayed by 10 years because security agencies said it's a security threat to the country, so we can't allow mobile phones. So 10 years was the price that we paid in terms of time. So all that has happened because of the mobile phones, if it all was happening at a 10-year earlier time frame, imagine where we would be. So similarly, if you look at other areas where even today there are huge issues, like in the case of, for example, the map policy, there are constraints which prevent people from accessing digital spatial information and building various kinds of apps on top of that. Again, what's the reason? There are certain security restrictions which are often cited. And the result is that there is more accurate information about India's geospatial information, geographical information outside of India than in India to Indian users. The point of all of this is that the role of regulation and policy becomes a key driver in dealing with all of this change. And I think we have been quite fortunate in terms of having a financial sector regulator which has been fairly progressive and I think which has played a good role and a strong role not only in enabling some of these changes to come in, but also in creating some of the core infrastructure. We've heard from the NSDL, NPCI is the core infrastructure for this sector, and UPI and so many other building blocks of all of this have been enabled. But you also reach a point now where the challenge and the disruption is coming from people outside the sector. The first was the wave of telcos, the wave of other financial service providers who were assimilated. And then one of the dilemmas, I was just having a chat with Mr. Gandhi before the session, and one of the big challenges for regulators always is that there will be a lot of pressure from incumbents who have made big investments, or even the regulator who has made investments in maybe some infrastructure. As how much do you wait? How long do you wait till that investment is worked off in the sense that it recovers its value. But in the world in which we live in today, the new wave of technologies simply wipe out the previous wave. There are no guarantees that earlier investments will pay for themselves. And therefore, one has to keep getting on to the next wave and the next wave, and success goes to those who are able to read that roadmap better. So the question is whether that speed of the enablement is keeping pace, given the kind of fintech ecosystem that we have, given the type of startup ecosystem that we have, given the pace of innovation that we have, given the pace of investments into that innovation, it is going to come faster and faster and faster. And therefore, it's absolutely important as a country that we take advantage of those factors and figure out a way to assimilate innovation as quickly as it is actually happening in the ecosystem outside. Even within the IT sector, the large companies realize that they may not be the best at innovation. They have huge strengths, of course. They have a global presence, they have a global service delivery model, they have huge marketing muscle, they have deep financial pockets. But all of that is not good enough to be the best at innovation. And then there are small companies which are very niche, which have very strong technology capability, which are absolutely at the leading edge in terms of innovation, but they don't have the marketing muscle, they don't have the deep pockets, and they don't have the global reach. And therefore, it has actually now become, in fact, one of the most successful elements of our agenda to promote the startup ecosystem has been to build this partnership between the large players and the small players. That happened within the IT sector over the last 3 or 4 years. But today, value has moved from technology or from a domain into the junction points between technology and the domain. And so is the case with fintech, so is the case with healthcare, so is the case with education and learning. You can name any of these sectors, manufacturing, all of that. The greater value today is lying at the junction point between technology and the sector. And now with the advent of data analytics and artificial intelligence, the impact is becoming larger, the pace of change is becoming bigger, and the possibilities are increasing even more. I think there was that analogy about the fish, which was cited, but I want to use that in a slightly different context. As we are moving into the digital age at a faster and faster pace, we are drowning in data. And we will drown even more as we have increasing preponderance of machine-to-machine communication. A lot of communications which are not even triggered by human beings, but which are actually triggered at a machine level. But ultimately, to make sense out of all of that, the data analytics and artificial intelligence are going to increasingly become the key. So it is, the data is like the water which is all around us, but to abstract meaning from that is like being able to abstract the oxygen from that water, which is what fish do, and which is why they're able to survive in that and actually prosper and grow. But if you don't have those features, then you really cannot actually draw that value from the data. Now, for the critically for the financial sector, the question now is, how do we actually prepare ourselves for the future? Today we have maybe the top 200, 300 million not only having mobile phones but having the smartphones, having the capability to use them. But even today, the main applications, if you look at the top 3 drivers, they are WhatsApp, Facebook, and Messenger. Can financial services be the next killer app? The policies that the government has put in, whether it is the move towards digital India or the GST, have provided a big boost. Demonetization also has shown a big spike in the use of digital services. And there are a lot of other stumbling blocks which have actually prevented the pace of adoption from going at the pace perhaps which it is capable of going. The question is, do we have the products? Do we have the technologies which are relevant as you go further and further down? There is a view within the industry that the usage will plateau at 200 to 300 million internet users unless we are able to crack some of the other problems, like, for example, voice-based systems, or other ways in which people who are not highly literate or even not just computer literate but even literate in the conventional sense, unless we are able to create products and services which make sense to them. Again, to look at other examples, we know that in India most of the people don't necessarily own property. So all the conventional methods in the banking sector of assessing an individual's creditworthiness fall the moment you go beyond the first maybe 100 billion people or 200 billion people. But at the same time, all of us know, and we have all dealt with people who we know are extremely trustworthy, extremely reliable, and who you can lend money to without a doubt in your mind. The problem is, how do you identify them? How do you identify them in the absence of the normal kind of evidence of some property? And this is again where, as an example, the more that payments get digitized, you now are in a position to track the financial flows of every individual. And the financial flow itself can become a basis for providing credit or for doing some of the things which hitherto were done in very different ways. This challenges conventional thinking, and when conventional thinking is challenged, the first reaction is to either ignore it or to laugh at it or to fight it off. This has happened in the case of when it happened in the case of the medical sector, for example. Most people said, no, this requires very specialized knowledge. So how can an artificial intelligence system do this? The reality is, and I think we heard in the earlier session representative from the IBM talking about Watson, that the accuracy levels there are higher than most specialists, except the really very top people. Chess players, a game I was very fond of, felt for a long time that artificial intelligence is never going to be as good as a real chess player. But then Big Blue defeated even Kasparov. And this was way back more than 20 years ago. So each one of these bastions keep falling. If you look at teachers, most people say that no, teaching cannot be done through purely online programs unless there is a teacher and a mentor. And that's true to a certain extent. But at the same time, I think people are realizing that everywhere there is a point up to which you can go through these systems. And we are nowhere near that limit as far as the financial services are concerned. So the question is, the traditional institutions and the new technology institutions, how do we really couple them in ways which actually enable not only the pace to be accelerated, but to enable the creation of products and services which are relevant for a country like India. And that's not going to happen just by taking products and services from overseas. It's not going to happen through the normal credit cards or even debit cards, for sure. That's, if you look at the numbers, it's very obvious that there's no way you will ever reach this kind of a population through that. It has been evident for some time now that the only way you can probably do that is when you go through the mobile phone. So we now have the advent of the QRs, which are which are much cheaper and much more cost effective. So each of such evolution, I think, needs to be brought in. There is not only a cost to taking the wrong decision, there is a cost to not taking a decision also. And there is a cost to even taking the right decision with a delay, because time has started shrinking in this world. So an event like this, I think, becomes important because it gives an opportunity to really assess where the issues and problems are. Is it in the policy? Is it in the regulation? Is it in the adoption of technology by incumbents? Is it in the building the collaborative models between the incumbents and the technology players? And how do you systematically break each one of these barriers? I think that holds the key. But the good news is, and I say this with both some pride as well as some confidence, that in India we have all the ingredients to be able to crack this problem ourselves. We don't have to look too much outside, but it's a question of applying our mind to it and coming up with the approach that let's use the technology, let's evolve the technology further to provide the kind of services and the kind of applications and the kind of solutions that India needs, and nowhere more than in the financial sector. So thank you very much, and I do want to congratulate the team which has been behind this event on having organized this event on a very timely topic and having assembled a very exciting and interesting set of speakers on different topics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We look forward to your future help too. Mr. Kumar Shah, he is the MD and Sunriser, who is the host of this. He will give his concluding address.
Good morning, everyone. As a host of this event, I welcome everyone to this event. The morning session has been really very interesting, as well as a lot of things have been discussed, which is just an eye-opener to me as well. I believe like everyone who has attended that masterclass session. And they have started the set of speakers have set the stage for all the session that is going to come after this inaugural session. And I'm hopeful that we'll have a lot of knowledge after the end of this session. There is a lot of takeaway we'll be having from this whole session. For the disruption, what I understand is today we are at a juncture where we disrupt or get disrupted. So,
on behalf of the host as well as our SOCM, Delight and Forum for Financial Inclusion System, may have the pleasure of presenting small memento to our chief guest, R. Chandrasekhar.
So, as I said, we are at a juncture where either we have to disrupt or we have to get disrupted. So, there is no other choice we have. And since the time is short, we have started late. I think I will take a session in the technological round where we'll discuss what we as a Senrisa is doing and what are the disruption that we are trying to build into for the country. Thank you. And I once again welcome everyone for coming to this event. Let us make this event successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Momentum. Yeah. May request Kumar Sa to present the memento to G. Nagesh Rao. I request Shantanu to present this to Manju Agarwal.
I'm just the inaugural session. I'll call you.
I have a pleasure to present this to Kalpesh Mehta.
And one for you.
गांधी साहब को देने का है. R. Gandhi is the Deputy Governor Reserve Bank. Please give him a big hand. Just retired.
And one for our conference advisory chairman, dear Sri Narendra ji.
We have 15 minutes break for
Break or all these people?
tea, yeah. Huh? Yeah. 15 minutes break for tea and the next section will follow. Please.